Hello, and welcome to the Argyle CIO Leadership Forum. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Patrick Benoit, Global Chief Information Security Officer, Brinks Incorporated. We are excited to have Patrick and our panelists for a panel discussion titled Cloud Transformation 2023. Welcome, Patrick. Over to you.
Thanks, Nicholas. I appreciate the warm welcome and excited to be here. Looking forward to a great discussion. We've got two amazing panelists with us. And so let's just get right to it. And we'll start out with introductions. Heather, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Patrick and Nicholas. It's great to be here. Hope everyone's having a really good day so far. And I'm excited to join you, Patrick, and Dan for this conversation today. Coming in from Washington, D.C. area where it's a nice sunny end of summer day, so all is well. I'm Heather Whitlock, and I'm the Director for Strategic Development at Adobe, where our mission really is around empowering work through digital experiences. I'm happy to share a little bit about what that means, but I'm really passionate about the work that we do and helping organizations, think about the vision, the strategies, and their objectives, how to get to that, especially as it relates to data, documents, and workflows. So excited to be here, and I'll pass it on to Dan.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're well. My name is Dan Beavis. I'm the Vice President, Chief Architect for Tokio Marine North America, which obviously is an insurance company, being Tokio Marine.
Great. It's really great to have you both here. Let's just jump right into the topic at hand, cloud transformation. I think for the benefit of everyone, maybe we should level set. How do you define cloud transformation, Dan?
It's interesting. So I guess the cloud transformation is, really the how are you getting to the cloud, really, right? So we all started on-prem long time ago, and now here specifically, it's a SaaS first approach to everything. So it's really how you're moving to the cloud, I think, cost effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Heather, do you define it any differently? And if so, how? But then what challenges are you seeing?
Yeah, good point. I agree with Dan, right, in terms of your comments and how it looks. I would say in addition to that, it's also thinking about, when we think about moving to cloud, and a lot of organizations are again, adopting that cloud first approach. But it's also, again, what sort of technologies and applications can we be leveraging with cloud-based technology? How can that really help us with the business results that we're looking for? How do we create experiences that delight not only employees, but also our customers with these types of applications? So, you talked about challenges, Patrick, but maybe, just to highlight a little bit about kind of the benefits, right? So the benefits really are, they're pretty expansive. And when we think about what that means, and it's funny because I have this memory about this topic that I was thinking about the other day around cloud computing. And you think about it from a history perspective, that term really became popular right around 2006. And I remember working with folks that were sort of like, what is this cloud technology thing all about, right? What does it mean for us? And a lot of folks were hesitant to kind of lean in. And we're now obviously here in 2023, and we can see that cloud is more pervasive than ever. And the cloud, to the technology, if you will, continues to improve, right? So it's helping us with time and cost savings, the ability to scale, the ability for organizations to leverage kind of, again, a pool group of resources for that. So the challenges, of course, there are some, right, as it relates to security, compliance, and things of those natures. But I would say, again, that's where a lot of organizations are leaning in to address those. challenges, but really, again, being able to create solutions, meet people where they are with the technology is really key, right? How do you give that experience to somebody that may not have access to the internet, for example?
Yeah, and so as we all move towards this magic kingdom called the cloud, which there is no cloud, it's just somebody else's infrastructure. So let's be honest about that up front. Yeah, it's somebody else's data center. So and we all have different responsibilities, but given all those challenges, Dan, how are you addressing this? There's a cultural aspect to it too, and getting the company to buy into this idea. Especially in insurance finance, there tends to be a more conservative approach. How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, I mean, I did say cost. I'll say it again, right? Our on-prem is less costly technically than our cloud, right? You still have to have an infrastructure team, even if you move to someone else's data center or the cloud. So and also realizing that our product is not cloud-based, right? Our product is the policies we're writing and the risks that we're assuming and the coverages that we give. So it's really showing a benefit of functionality, right? There's definitely more. There's faster. You can move faster in a lot of cases, development-wise. There's just certain the mobility, right? You don't have to VPN in. There's definitely the functional benefits in a lot of cases of moving to cloud-based platforms that we can give to sales, marketing, and other departments within our group companies.
Yeah, and I think it's great that you call out one of the greatest myths of all time, which is that cloud is inherently less expensive. It depends. The answer is it depends. And so very much so. Deviate from script a little bit, Heather, and talk about, we've got some questions coming in that ask about whether we're consolidating, whether we think we're going to get to a single cloud platform. But the interesting one to me is, how do you think the ever popular marketing term AI is going to play into this cloud transformation?
I so glad that question has come up, because AI, I mean, there's been no shortage of that term, right, out in the market recently. Everyone's thinking about it and leaning in and figuring out, like, what do we do with this? I think it's going to continue to increase, and I think what we need to be thinking about is, how do we leverage AI in a responsible and ethical way? That's something I know that we feel really passionate about on a regular basis in terms of what we're leaning into from a technology perspective. The example that I'd give is, from an AI perspective, is, like generative AI as an example. And we think about, how do we use generative AI to make sure that we have authenticity around documents? How can we automate documentation, like in our workflows? And we have been actually, some may be aware, but we've been one of the founding members of the Content Authenticity Initiative, where, again, the sort of coalition of companies that are coming together that are trying to instill the trust, right, that in terms of the content that we're seeing online. So if you think about, and this is what really excites me, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, but when we think about things like content credentials, think about it as sort of labels that we can put on content that will tell you, right, us as consumers, or us as, roles within our business. You can look at content and see who took that picture, or who took that video, when was it taken, how was it taken, have there been any edits to that content? That's the type of thing that we're seeing with AI that I think is going to be a very big game changer in terms of giving us the opportunity to look at that content and then determine whether or not we trust what's in that content ultimately, so that we can make those appropriate decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you're pointing out that that's one side of two very important aspects of AI, regardless of whether it's cloud or on-prem, where it's hosted, where it's operating, is that idea of the integrity or the trustworthiness of the output that comes from AI. Is it real or not, and how do you determine if it's real? And then the flip side of that is, how do you keep your data from the company leaking? How do you keep it from leaking everywhere in the world based on using AI in that respect? Dan, so the question is coming up in some cases, about this consolidation of cloud, and should we be hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, mono cloud? Should we be cloud agnostic with our tools, or should we use native tools? Can you speak a little bit about any strategy or approach that you're taking with respect to that?
So, I mean, obviously, for the SaaS first approach, you don't control what cloud they run on, right? So, when it comes to infrastructure as a service or platform as a service, we had started slightly hybrid, but really moved to a single cloud provider just because of our development teams and what they were familiar with, right? It makes it a lot easier when your teams can easily move to the cloud. And when it comes to the tooling, I guess it goes back to the pros and cons. Agnostic is nice, that you can move it from place to place, right? You can use things like Docker and other tools that can encompass your apps and keep you even more agnostic. There are advantages to some cloud native tools, like they're just really fast to develop on. So depending on what you're doing in the cloud, you would really make those decisions based on that, right? So if it is a cloud native tool and it only took a few hours to put that capability in, if you lose it, right, what's the loss cost?
Yeah.
I think it's more about the data storage too. Like, make sure your data is agnostic and you can move that. You really don't want your data locked somewhere.
Yeah, data egress is always where the big cost is.
Yeah.
And so, Heather, when you start talking about some of those things and surrounding data being in one cloud versus another, and if you do have to move, how do you protect yourself against that big cost of having to move because you've gone with maybe native tools?
Yeah, I think, it's really important, right? Back to the point of understanding where the data is. How do I get that data when I need to access it? How do I need to move that data? And I think, when I think about how to approach it, immediately I sort of think about making sure that organizations have some type of cloud center of excellence, right? So that you can take a look at it from different points of view. There's the infrastructure aspect to cloud, right? Where does the data sit? And then there's like software as a service, which Dan, you were kind of bringing up as well. Again, what does the software look like? Where does that data look like? And like really sitting down and planning, okay, these are all of our, this is our infrastructure, these are applications, and figuring out, and sort of like a puzzle piece, right? In some regards, you got to kind of take a look and take stock of what that is and understand the strategy of, how to access it. And then again, retrieve it based on whatever it is that you need.
Yeah. Well, there are some that would say, though, that there's a lot of capability to be harnessed in cloud computing around the, better data access and better analytics and such like that. Dan, do you find that to be the case? And do you have any best practices for harnessing that cloud compute for better data access and analytics?
There's definitely just more power up there, right? That is one of the bigger advantages. Taking into consideration egress costs, right? And one thing that, as the chief architect here, right, you don't just move data to the cloud because it sounds like fun, right? You really have to have a reason, a business objective to get there. It's really, I guess, minimizing the amount of data movements in and out. Once it's there, it's not expensive, but it's just, you can't take terabytes and move it up there and then move it back down and just move it to other clouds. Speaking of the hybrid that we talked about earlier.
Sure. And in doing that, you're obviously touching on the cost, and we've said that the egress cost is oftentimes the big cost involved there. But do you have any recommendations or ideas that you follow surrounding, how do you account for the spend? Do you charge back spend to your departments any differently, or do you account for it in your finances any differently, Heather? Or Dan, whichever.
Oh, sorry, Heather.
Yeah,
No.
I don't know if I have an opinion on that one. So I'll let you take it, Dan.
Sorry, I thought Pat said Dan. So we include the cloud cost for every planning, for every project that we do when we take it out a good 3 to 5 years. considering that it's a year-to-year charge, it's not really capitalizable.
Okay. Well, I mean, so you really don't treat it any differently than if you were putting in on-prem infrastructure. You're
Right.
just accounting for the cost, and it's an operational cost, an OpEx
Right.
cost.
I mean, the one difference is the on-prem data center is almost a sunk cost, right? But
Yeah.
we do use the tools and the calculations to figure out what a 3 to 5 would look like, specifically for infrastructure or platform, right? When it comes to SaaS providers, most of them are limited. So you take that into consideration as well based off of what you're putting up there.
Sure. And Heather, we talked about data access and analytics and things like that and egress. Adobe's obviously a worldwide company. Do you have any recommendations or philosophies you follow with respect to locality of data, and how do you deal with that? Because obviously with the cloud, it becomes a different question now.
Yeah, absolutely. Understanding kind of what the requirements are first and foremost in terms of, what does the application need to do? Where does the data need to be, et cetera, right? And so that's where you see organizations investing in the local requirements, right? Sometimes that are required to leverage cloud capabilities. And again, when we see, just to when we talk about data, and we talk about some of the challenges of actually managing a cloud infrastructure, if we take a step back and take a look at a lot of organizations that are still doing a lot of business on paper, right? And we think about like being able to take paper out of the equation and being able to move to more cloud, like so many benefits there in terms of faster decision making, right? Less around where's the data always stored, but like, how do I make faster decisions now that these documents have gone from paper to digital? And that type of experience, if you will, is really where folks are leaning in to say, as a consumer, right? If somebody asks me to come in and sign a piece of paper, for example, and I need to drive an hour to get there to do that, you sort of like, why are we still doing that in this day and age, right? We can electronically sign things very quickly, and again, have access to that data right away to be able to move forward. And I think it's those organizations, right, that are leaning into those experiences. Those are the ones that are surviving and thriving, versus those that are still working on paper in a lot of ways, where again, we can really digitize a lot of those things. So not to kind of backtrack a little bit, but I think it was kind of it's good to point out, like, again, what's the journey that we're trying to bring around these cloud transformations, and what does it look like? So that gives a little perspective on, again, the management of it, of course.
What I think is fascinating to me is that each new regulation of some sort forces the cloud model into effectively an on-prem model. And so as a result of that, the cloud providers are going to charge more as you get closer to what looks like an on-prem model. For example, if you say data locality and you say, we have to have our data located in this country. Okay, that's great, but now that takes flexibility away from the cloud provider. And so they're going to charge you more now to effectively build an on-prem solution using their cloud infrastructure. So we're hurting ourselves in that way. And I just find that completely fascinating. Dan, Heather alluded to some history earlier and talked about 2006 when we talked about the definitions of what cloud transformation is. Can you talk a little bit about it? Are you seeing a change? Cloud computing is not new, obviously, it's been around for quite some time, but are you seeing a change in the business strategy or the view towards cloud, how we're innovating in cloud? Is that changing over time now?
I don't know if specifically, if I look at our business people, they really have an opinion. I do think they think it's easier for them if I'm providing solutions that are in the cloud.
And is it really though?
To them, it probably looks it. To us in IT, I'm not really sure, because it's, you still need all the same people. They're just, logging into a different dashboard to validate what's running and what isn't.
Gotcha. Heather, how are we innovating differently? Do you see a difference?
I do see a difference. Again, when you think about early cloud, again, infrastructure and applications from a long time ago, and it's funny, I mean, a lot of that dates back to the 1960s, but I do see it evolving quite a bit. And I see that the trust is building along with it. Now, to your point around like the locality of data, et cetera, like we still have a long way to go to make sure that all that trust is inherently there. So maybe we don't have to go to those lengths sometimes around that. But I would say, the question before around AI, I do think artificial intelligence and how we use that, I know that's a broad term, but how do we use that in a way, leveraging, again, the power of the cloud computing behind the scenes to do that in a way that is going to really propel the way we do business. And I see that as the biggest area that everybody should be leaning in on to understand this, disruption that's taking place, and more importantly, how folks can take advantage of it. And of course, do it in a way that's responsible and ethical. And we're instilling more trust, not less trust.
Yeah. So Dan, what do you think are some of the gotchas or the things to look out for when you're really focused on cloud transformation or just cloud computing in general?
When I think about it, some of the questions that I was pondering, and it also does depend a lot on what your business is, right? I mean, if you're a streaming service or something, cloud makes sense because that's part of how you're gonna get your profits. When I look at it, when it's a secondary aspect of it, when it's more of a cost, it's a cost center, and specifically in insurance as an example, because it's not our product, it's not, it's a ease of working with external users. It really is. It comes down to what's the best place to do this. Is it cloud or is it an on-prem? Really?
Sure. Well, that makes sense. Heather, any gotchas to look out for?
Any gotchas? I think maybe no gotchas, but careful planning, right? Having the right strategy and approach, and making sure that you have professionals, right, dedicated in your organization to truly understanding this. There's a huge, significant war for talent, if you will, right, around cloud and what that looks like. So making sure your organization has that, I think, is key, so that you can put together that thoughtful strategy approach and determine what that's going to look like, again, for your organization. So to avoid the gotchas, do careful planning, I would say, is the big one.
There you go. Yeah. And I had to understand the responsibilities and, that race between you and the cloud provider. That's always a big gotcha in my mind. So.
Absolutely. And I think, if I could just add to that, it's when we look at, again, organizations, I think it's, again, it takes a village oftentimes to come up with these types of solutions and strategies. So it's absolutely critical, not only for IT to come together, but also come together with the business, because the two have to work together in a very effective way in order to kind of ultimately execute that strategy. And I have seen countless times in organizations where maybe business and IT may not be aligned or fully understand. And then there's sort of like these moments in programs or projects that it's like, wait a minute, I thought it was going to work this way. And it's maybe different than expectations. So setting those expectations between business and IT in the very beginning and continuing that journey, I think, is really important too.
Okay, absolutely agree. And Dan, do you have any insights into how we draw those requirements out of the business so that we are aligned properly?
Right, that's a great one. Yeah, that's one of my favorite cartoons. Right, the guy only wanted to swing, but it turned out to be like a tire in a tree. Yeah. As Heather said, I'm a huge fan of POCs. Small deliverables have reasonable amount of solutioning, and then it's a lot of show and tell. So make sure you're really trying to give them what they're getting and find out early on if it's headed in the right direction.
Yeah, that whole control aspect, though, let me ask you about this, because this is one that I've encountered in every company I've ever been in. Is cloud is so easy to get into, and it's really easy to say that we have governance that says we have a single cloud infrastructure, a single cloud instance that we're going to use company wide. But as the companies grow and you grow through acquisition or otherwise, different regions and so forth, you end up with a variety of instances of a cloud. How do you keep track of that? How do you control that? How do you understand, what that looks like, Heather? Do you have any panaceas, any great pearls of wisdom?
Well, it happens quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
Organizations, right? Welcome new organizations to theirs, right? As they expand and new organizations pop up. So no, I think that's a real thing in terms of kind of taking stock of that. Because you bring a few organizations and kind of merge them together, right? They all have their infrastructure and they may do some things the same, may do many things different. So by having that sort of, again, cloud center of excellence to help track and manage that, right, as part of either an acquisition or however those organizations are coming together, tracking the cloud infrastructure, if you will, any software as a service, all those types of things together, so that when you're going through that, you can make those decisions to say, okay, this is what it looks like, and maybe these things are okay in the short term, but longer term, we need to adapt them into our overall strategy and do what makes the most sense. I've seen so many, and that's a great example, Patrick, too, when I think about a lot of folks have different either infrastructure or software out there where maybe they did a POC, to your point, Dan, right? And then maybe the business doesn't know about it, or other parts of large organizations don't know about these things took place. And so you see a lot of things sort of maybe sit there, if you will, and not really get the benefits of either scaling or the benefits of the ROI around that investment, because folks don't know about it. So I think it's really important to kind of market the successes you have internally around it and say, hey, we have this instance of something, right? Let's continue to use it. And I think actually we'll see a lot better cost optimization when we do that and take advantage of it. But again, that requires businesses to share their successes around leveraging some of this technology. So that you don't end up, to your point, Patrick, with like this bucket of all kinds of things that everyone's bought along the way, and you don't sort of have, full transparency around that. So.
Yeah. Well, when we talk, let's kind of divert to this idea of, I think there's, in the business, there's this somewhat misunderstanding, or at least belief, that there's far greater resiliency in the cloud than what may exist in on-prem. I know all of us, we don't necessarily believe that that's true, but do you think, how much consideration has to be given to, regional diversity within the CSP, CSP diversity? Should you have CSP diversity to be able to ensure that you have resilience in your cloud infrastructure? Dan?
I would say we follow the same model as we do on-prem for replicating data to make sure, we have return to operation requirements and everything. So we're very governed to make sure that we're hitting all the needs and don't impact business uptime, I'll say.
Gotcha. Okay. And Heather, are there any special considerations, being such a large company, that with respect to how you diversify your cloud infrastructure?
Yeah, in terms from an internal point of view, and then sort of like externally point of view, I think similar to what Dan had mentioned, right, in terms of having, making sure you have different strategies based on the type of data. Again, back to the type of data that you're looking for. In some cases, it's absolutely imperative that you have a backup structure, if you will, or, continuity of operations. What is that going to look like? And to have a plan in place if you're dealing with, real time, mission critical type of application systems, et cetera. In other cases, it may not be as necessary. So it kind of depends on, again, the scenarios and the business that's using some of those things. But I think it's important to take a look at.
Okay, great. Have either of you had any experience with regard to migrating between, cloud providers? And if so, what was that experience like? How adaptable and how easy was it to migrate between cloud providers? Any experience there?
I am lucky enough to say no, not yet.
Okay, fair enough.
No, most of my experience has been helping folks get to cloud in a variety of ways, whether it be infrastructure, software, et cetera. But I haven't personally gone through that journey yet.
I expect that looms in our future. Yeah, that looms in our future sometime, right? It's all cyclical. Once everybody gets in the cloud, then they'll start moving around the cloud. We'll have to deal with that. A question came up, and we had touched on it briefly earlier about data sovereignty and keeping it in the locality that we need to and so forth. But this question centered around how do you respond to customers that are demanding data sovereignty? I'm going to make the flip answer and then let y'all expand on it. The flip answer is, well, you charge them for it. If it costs you more, it costs them more. That's kind of the fact of life, right? Have y'all experienced that where you've got to deal with customers that are saying you must have data in this locality? Dan, anything?
I can kick it
Heather, go
off if
ahead.
you want, Dan.
ahead.
I'm smiling because I'm like, yes, absolutely.
Go for it, Heather.
I've certainly experienced that. As customers, right, if we've all put ourselves in the customer seat, we all have, again, different requirements, et cetera. And we sort of, oftentimes will say, I need this. I think it's first important to unpack, okay, why do you need it? What's generating it? I've heard many organizations cite compliance. I need this compliance, or I need this. And it's like, okay, help me understand for this, what do you need it for? And a lot of folks will say, well, I don't really know what it means. I just know that that's the term and that I need to have it, type of thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that healthy conversation around what is it that you're looking for, or, what does it look like? Because there are options, back to your point, Patrick, right? Option A is maybe there's a solution and it can be leveraged as is. Or option B is maybe something new can be created to meet those needs if they don't already exist. But oftentimes, again, there's a cost impact associated with that. And again, many organizations will lean in and say, you know what, due to industry regulatory requirements, I need to do that. And I understand it's going to cost more. Please, let's go ahead and move forward. In other cases, some folks say, after some thoughtful consideration, I don't think we actually need to do that. I think actually maybe what the solution currently provides will be okay. So it's always just important to ask questions, around what it is and why it's needed, because sometimes, you may be surprised that, the thing that you think you need as a customer may not be indeed what you ultimately need. And you can get it, of course, to your point, cheaper. So.
Yeah. And Dan, were you chomping at the bit? I know you let Heather go, but I thought you were ready to go there.
It's very highly regulated, right? So every state has a Department of Insurance, and they all have specific requirements. I think of New York and California specifically. So, we store data, to meet those regulations. And that is really what drives it. I wouldn't say there's specific customers that say I need my data in, I don't know, Maryland, as an example.
Yeah, another question has come in around data, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase or reword just a little bit. The real bottom line of the question is, how do you explain to your business or your customers that that they still have the same level of ownership and control of data if it's in the cloud versus on-prem? Dan, you want to jump on that first before Heather jumps in there?
Yeah.
So I mean, it really comes down to the agreements that you're signing with these providers. When I think of some of our SaaS providers, the data has to be extractable. So we make sure that we always have basically raw copies of whatever the data is on our system, something, to the earlier questions related to something agnostic to any certain specific solution.
That's it. Heather?
I echo those sentiments, Dan. And in addition, I would say, that saying of bad data in, bad data out, good data in, good data out is, absolutely, regardless of any platform, right? Cloud, on-prem, et cetera. The most paramount example, folks sometimes misunderstand cloud. Oh, I can get better data, et cetera. You can get access to faster data. You have more power behind how you get that. You can make faster decisions, all that type of stuff. But again, the business has to provide really good data, or customers have to provide really good data in order for that to be effective. So cloud doesn't solve that challenge necessarily. But again, through applications and through other things, you can take a look at how to do that. So we as consumers, we as business operators have to continue to find ways to encourage good data right in so that we can make those better decisions and provide the data that organizations need to be able to cater right to your expectations, either as a consumer or otherwise.
Yeah, I always teach the idea of bigger, better, faster, or bigger, better, faster problems if you have bad data like that. Now, I'm not going to leave the developers off the hook, though. Sometimes you put in good data and you get out bad data, Heather. It just depends. But, so we can't leave them completely off the hook. So what's really next? I mean, what are the things that you see looming on the horizon that are going to be the big impactful things for the cloud transformation journey? Heather?
For me, I think, again, I'm just really, excited and leaning in about how we can leverage cloud to transform the whole document management process. Because again, documents have the data ultimately that we're talking about unleashing and making those really good decisions. So whether or not, making sure that documents and data have, can be generated at scale, right? Leveraging the systems that we have, applying appropriate compliance, like accessibility tags, and being able to kind of take a lot of unstructured data that we have and a lot of the content, right, that we have hosted in cloud. How can we extract that content and then be able to, basically take that and then use it to make better decisions, and help that along the way. So to me, it's all about kind of the document productivity aspects, creative aspects to the overall business work streams of kind of what's next and what's exciting, and how do we do that in a way that's going to be really meaningful for folks.
Cool. Dan, anything exciting in your view coming up?
I do have to agree. I think cloud technology specifically allow you to get better usage of your data, because you can put more processing against it. You can explore it in different ways. Tools are easier to find. I don't know, one has always interested me, and I don't know how near term it is, but quantum computing and cloud is one thing that would be, maybe it's too futuristic, but very interesting.
Again, bigger, better, faster problems. Yeah. Bigger, better, faster problems again, right?
Yeah, really fast, really
fast problems. Yeah, really. An interesting question came in, and since we've been answering these as we go, I think we can use up the time to do that. They're talking about the idea of, have we really reached the peak in what we can do with cloud computing because of the movement back from out of office to in office? So I guess the question that comes to mind for me is, and Dan, if you'll start, how or do you think that this flip-flap of hybrid workplace is having any impact on the efficacy or the cloud transformation going forward? Is there really any play about where somebody works as to whether we're putting in the cloud or not?
I mean, to me, I don't think so, right? The cloud it's a tool to me. It's a different tool to implement a solution that meets a business need. So if I can do it on premise, I can do it either way, really. I don't know. I don't think for just what I'm seeing,
Yeah.
I don't see hybrid work impacting where we put things.
Do you see how it plays in this? Is there a play?
I think to me, it goes back to business need. I don't see work location or remote or in office impacting that.
Okay. Heather, do you see a difference there?
I think to Dan's point, I think hybrid work is here to stay. I think it's about evolving. I certainly don't think we've peaked out in terms of cloud transformation. I mean, there are a tremendous amount of organizations that still are on mainframes, and they are not there yet. So I think we are still early on, and I think hybrid work is here to stay. And I think we need to meet people where they are with the technology, responsible, ethical way, and continue to figure out, again, environmentally, right? That's always a big topic. How do we continue to take paper out of the equation, right? Get to digital. So I think we're just still on the cusp of what's to come.
Okay, great. Well, so we are near the point where we would open for questions, but again, we've been kind of melding these questions in as we've gone. So Heather, do you have any like thoughts of things that we may have failed to mention? Any last comments that you want to get out in the next couple of minutes, and then we'll give Dan a couple minutes too.
Well, I think, by the way, the outpouring of questions and the collaboration has been really great. So again, just thanks for everybody kind of for leaning in. There's, there is a lot of tons of resources on cloud transformation that are out there, certainly. So I encourage the community, right, of us at large to continue the conversation and the dialogue around this and to share best practices. That's why forums like this are so helpful, right, so that we can talk through it. So, I kind of alluded to earlier, I'm really optimistic about the future ahead. I'm excited about where cloud can be enhanced through AI and enhanced in terms of how we can trust data in a good way. And that's something, like I said, that we're focusing on in particular around content, being able to, again, attach labels and credentials around it so that we see where that content's coming from. So no, I think that's about all I was going to mention. So Dan, I'll pass it on to you to see any other comments.
So I guess I would repeat and probably repeat some things. I think like Heather, you had brought up to make sure you have a COE, like you need to make sure you have governance in place when you move there. It's easy to get to, it's easy to use, but it's also easy to lose. So we worked really, just making sure you have that in place and make sure, your transformation is going to happen because, we do it, right? We're going SaaS first and it's cost effective. So in some cases, just make sure, you're driving it with business needs.
Okay, great. And a couple more questions have come in around, again, they're still talking about data. I think what I get out of the question that I'm seeing here now is there's a lot of data. As you go to cloud, we seem to generate more and more and more data. We have more capacity to have more data. How are we producing meaningful analytics out of that data? How are we keeping control of making the data useful? Dan, any thoughts on that?
Making it useful, yeah, there's definitely a lot of data being generated. I think it's having the right tooling around it. There's a lot of good tools out there to help you analyze, like we've been mentioning AI, ML tools out there, not even bringing up large language models yet, because who knows what that's going to even look like. So, being able to process in the cloud is it's like we brought up, is faster. So it's about that tooling that allows you to leverage the data.
Yeah, Heather, thoughts?
Yeah, well, appreciate my point of view, I guess, from an Adobe point of view, right? I mean, kind of being the inventor, if you will, or the leader in PDFs, like that's exactly what I get excited about and think about in terms of how can we take a lot of the data in PDF files alone, and how can we, again, extract that data? Sometimes, right, the data is just in the PDF and it's sort of like, well, where does it go? So how do you leverage technology like APIs, for example, then to like take that data out of documents, right? Extract that information, be able to your point around analytics and decision making, use it for that purpose. How do you generate, documents at scale? How do you, put the accessibility around these documents? That to me is where, again, I see a lot of opportunities, again, from a data point of view of how do you unlock that data? And then again, how do you use it for analytics? And like I said, I think we're really on the cusp of a lot of those things, right? So it depends on what the data is and where it's located. And then again, how do you unlock it?
Yeah, and I think that's critical. We're getting near the end of our time here, and I'll make one last comment to hopefully wrap this a little bit is I caution everyone all the time, stop trying to do things just because you're trying to put a cloud slant on it or a cloud nuance on it. Let's, stick with our basics, crawl, walk, run, and remember that cloud really is just somebody else's data center, someone else's infrastructure, someone else's platform or whatever, SaaS even, and focus on the business impact and just be aware of what tools and capabilities that you have that may be different because you're in the cloud, or maybe faster, or maybe more agile because you're in the cloud. But don't try and make it a let's find out what we can do because we're in the cloud. Deal with your business first and use the tools of the cloud to get there. So with that, I thank you, Dan. Thank you, Heather. Great session. And I'll turn it back over to you, Nicholas. We had a great time.
Great. And thank all of you for such an excellent panel discussion. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event.